I've told you many times about my experience as a reporter back at WITL in Lansing, Michigan from 1968. Well, I was a DJ from 68 to 71, I think. And then I was a news reporter from 71 to 78. And during the time that I did news, now this was, keep in mind it was 87 that Reagan stopped enforcing the Fairness Doctrine. And of course, it was 1996 that Bill Clinton signed the Telecommunications Act, and they completely changed the media landscape. But back when I worked in news, and for that matter, when I was a DJ, if talent was caught talking to sales, both got fired. And if a client tried to influence the programming on our radio station, they would no longer be a sponsor. I mean, it was just very simple. And that was because of the Fairness Doctrine and because of the media, anti-consolidation rules that were in place that were basically repealed, media ownership rules that were repealed with the Telecommunications Act of 96. And it almost seems like President Obama in this speech is reaching back to that era. I mean, he's in his 50s. He's not as old as I am, but he's old enough to remember when we actually had real news in America. Now, most people didn't work in the news department, so they don't realize how rigorous, actually, we were in making sure that our news was actually news and was uninfluenced by our politicians. So anyhow, or by our advertisers, excuse me. So here is President Obama. This is clip number 4, speaking about this.
Part of the independence of the Fourth Estate is that it is not government controlled, and media companies thereby have an obligation to pursue profits on behalf of their shareholders and their owners. But it also has an obligation to invest a good chunk of that profit back into news and back into public affairs and to maintain certain standards and to not dumb down the news and to have higher aspirations for what effective news can do, because a well-informed electorate depends on you, and our democracy depends on a well-informed electorate.
Amen. I mean, I was waiting for him to say, "Tag, you're it." It depends on you, and here we are. So, what do we do about that? I mean, obviously, I think rolling back Reaganism in its entirety would be very, very useful. I doubt that's going to happen tomorrow morning. Clip number 5, President Obama pointing out there is a choice that these corporations now, these media corporations, have to make.
So the choice between what cuts into your bottom lines and what harms us as a society is an important one. We have to choose which price is higher to pay, which cost is harder to bear.
And see, it used to be that basically, as a reporter, I knew, and it was a fun gig back. It was interesting when I was a reporter at Whittle. We would, in fact, Louise used to sometimes go with me, just for the fun of it. And we were young and in love and just married and having a good time, running around like crazy. And, you get up at 5 and you go down to the police station and you get the police blotter for the day before. And then at 8 o'clock, by 7:30 or 8 o'clock, I was over at Mayor Jerry Graves' office in Lansing, Michigan. And we'd interview the mayor and, find out what's going on there. And then we'd walk across the street to the state capitol as the legislators were arriving. And, you get back to the studio, back to the station by 9:30, 10, something like that, and cut up all these pieces, and literally cutting tape with razor blades and things, editing things together and putting together the newscasts for the day and for the future. And always the question was, what is it that really is important for people to know? What actually is news here? Not, what's the salacious stuff? What's the train wreck stuff? And I think we have these 2 huge and stark examples of media failure in front of us right now. Well, arguably 3, I would say, in fact. Number 1 is the rise of Donald Trump. He's gotten over $2 billion, or in the neighborhood of $2 billion worth of free media publicity. Number 2 is the invisibility of Senator Sanders on the media landscape when he's so far ahead of both Ted Cruz and John Kasich in terms of, how he's doing in the race. And yet Cruz and Kasich are still getting all kinds of media. In fact, you're going to have full hours of them tonight on the Trump network. So, you've got that. And then the third example, and the very conspicuous one is, although it's gotten better over the last year or so, particularly since the Los Angeles Times, I think, started this trend of saying we will no longer put climate deniers on our pages. But you've got this whole, multi-decade long, climate change is not settled science, which was preceded by a multi-decade long, cigarettes causing cancer is not settled science. And by the way, it was the same PR firms. And in many cases, even the same so-called scientists. So anyhow, President Obama, this clip number 6, right, is the next one? Yeah, here he is.
So I believe the electorate would be better served if your networks and your producers would give you the room, the capacity to follow your best instincts and dig deeper into the things that might not always be flashy but need attention.
And see, that's what we used to do. I was just describing, that kind of morning grind of getting the news and finding the people and all that sort of thing. Well, it used to be that we did that stuff because the law required it. It wasn't so much the law. It wasn't like, you must be a reporter. But we knew that if the radio station that I worked at, which had, I think, 5 people on its news, might have been 7 even, and not all at the same time, obviously, on its news staff, and probably today has none. Probably they're just carrying network news, as almost every radio station in America does. That they knew that if they wanted to get their license renewed at the end of the year, that they had to demonstrate to the FCC that they had been programming in the public interest, and that meant running real news, even though they lost money on their newscasts. That whole news department was a loss for that radio station. I mean, they made their money up on the music side, on advertising and whatnot, but news was not a profit maker anywhere. Of the big 3 networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, they lost millions every year on news. But news actually informed people, and we haven't had that basically since the late 70s, since the late 80s. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.